Hello guys, welcome to my channel Chess Wizard. In this video we are going to learn chess notations with basics. And if you want to improve your chess skills, then this video and channel is for you. By the way, if you don't know how to play chess, then I would suggest you watch this video by clicking on this I button above. Once you have understood all the basic rules of chess, the next step is to learn chess notation. You might ask, why is this so important? Well, if you want to play a chess tournament over the board, or even if you're just a player learning the game, you need to know how to record your games. Algebraic chess notation is an official method recognized by FIDE for recording and describing the moves in a game of chess. This is what we generally call the language of chess, and this is how we read, write and talk about chess. So let's start with the absolute basics. Look, each column on the chessboard is called a file and each row is called a rank. Every file on the chessboard is given a letter, starting with the letter A on the left side of the board and going all the way to the letter H on the right side of the board. Each rank is assigned a number from 1 to 8, just like you see here. Remember, at the start of a chess game, all the white pieces are placed on ranks 1 and 2 and all the black pieces are placed on ranks 7 and 8. Based on this concept of files and ranks, every square on the chessboard is assigned a unique name and identity. Each square is simply named after its coordinate pair. Which means, this square on the lower left-hand corner is known as a 1. We identify it by simply putting together the file letter and rank number. Similarly, this square is called D6 since it belongs to the D file and the 6th rank. This square, for example, will be called F7. And this one is H8. In this way, we can easily assign a name to all these 64 squares on the chessboard. Now let's see how we can notate all the chess pieces. It's actually quite straightforward. We just need to use the first letter of each piece to describe that piece in chess. Which means the king's letter is a capital K, the rook is a capital R, the queen is a capital Q, the bishop, a capital B, the knight however, is a little different. Since the letter K is already reserved for the king, therefore, for the knight, we use the letter N. Now finally, you may think that pawns would be represented by a capital P. But for the pawns, we don't use any such letters, so keep that in mind. Now that you know the names of the squares and the notation of the pieces, it's time to learn the notation of actual moves in a chess game. To write a move, we simply combine the notation of the piece with the notation of the square it moves to. Remember, you only need to mention the square where the piece moves to and not the square where it was originally. Let's take an example. In this game, when white plays this as the first move, then we will write it as Nf3. The capital N is for the knight and F3 is the square where this knight moves to. Another thing to remember is that a piece is always written in uppercase, whereas the letter of the square is always in lowercase. Now say, for example, black plays this move, then how will we write this? Yes, it will be written as D5. As I mentioned earlier, there is no letter for the pawn. And since the square it moves to is on the D file and 5th rank, therefore, we write this move as D5 only. Similarly, this move will be written as NC3, which means knight has moved to C3. And this one will be written as BF5, which means the bishop has moved to the F5 square. As you can see, for every move, we first write down white's move followed by black's move. We keep doing this till the end of the game, and this is how we can record all the moves in a game of chess. Okay, now let's talk about some special symbols that we use in chess notation. Look, we have different symbols for captures, pawn promotion, checks and checkmate. Let's look at them one by one. To show a piece capture, we use a small X symbol between the piece and the square. For example, in this position, if white takes this knight on C6 with his bishop, then we notate it as a capital B for the bishop, followed by a small X for the capture and finally C6, for the destination square where this bishop moves to. Similarly, if this black pawn captures this bishop, then we will write it as C, which means we are talking about this pawn on the C file, then a small x for the capture, followed by c6, the destination square, which ultimately means that the c pawn captured on c6. Okay, now let's talk about pawn promotion. When a pawn moves to the last rank and promotes itself, we generally use the symbol of is equal to, and after that, we indicate the symbol of the piece it is promoted to. Say, for example, in this position, if white moves this pawn from e7 to e8 and promotes to a queen, then we write it as e8 is equal to q. Similarly, if this black pawn captures this bishop on d1 and promotes to a knight, then we will write it as e cross d1 is equal to n. I think you got the point. Alright, now let's look at the symbol for a check. For a move that places the opponent's king in check, we generally use this plus symbol at the end. Here's an example. In this position, if white checks the black king with his rook, then we can simply write it as r for the rook, followed by a 1, followed by this plus sign which signifies a check. Now in this same position, if white takes this pawn with his queen, then we can simply write it down as q for the queen, followed by a small x for the capture, followed by h6 for destination square, followed by the plus sign for the check. So that's queen takes on h6 with a check. Okay, now let's talk about a checkmate. A checkmate is represented by the hash symbol, just like this. For example, in this game, when this rook goes on a8, then it's a checkmate. Therefore, we will write it as r for the rook, followed by a8, which is the destination square, followed by this hash symbol, which means it is a mate. Now let's move on to some special moves like castling and en passant. If you are not aware of these rules, then again, I would recommend you watch my How to Play Chess video by clicking on this I button above. Let's talk about castling first. For kingside castling, which is the short castle, we use the special notation 0-0 or O-O, however you want to say it. On the other hand, for queenside castling, which is the long castle, we use the special notation 0-0-0 or the 3 Os. It's quite straightforward. Now let's look at en passant. In this position, if black plays pawn to f5, then white has the right to capture this pawn en passant. Therefore, when white takes this pawn, we will go by the same logic as we discussed earlier. We begin with the letter G where this pawn was earlier, followed by a small x for the capture, followed by f6 and not f5 because f6 is the destination square for this white pawn. It's nothing different, just that you need to be careful about the destination square. Alright, now let's look at some unique positions where two or more identical pieces can move to the same square. Let's understand this with the help of an example. In this position, it's white's turn and say for example, he wants to move this knight to e4. Generally, you would simply notate this move as ne4, but the problem is that even this knight could move to the e4 square. So if we write just ne4, then how will you identify which knight has moved to e4? Well, in such situations, where two or more identical pieces can move to the same square, we need to specify either the file, rank or even both after the notation of the piece. In this case, both these knights are on different files. This knight is on the C file and this knight is on the G file. Therefore, when this knight moves to e4, we will notate this move as n for the knight for the C file where this knight was, followed by e4, which signifies that the knight on the C file has moved to e4 and not this one. Let's take another example. Now let's say black wants to capture this a6 pawn with this a3 rook. How will you notate this move? You cannot use this a here since both these rooks are on the a file. In this case, since the files of both the pieces are same, you will now need to check the ranks. This rook is on the 3rd rank and this one is on the 8th. Since both these rooks are on different ranks, we will use the notation of the rank. Therefore, we will notate this move as r for the rook, followed by 3 for the 3rd rank where this rook originally was, followed by x for the capture, followed by a 6 which is the destination square. In summary, for such situations, you need to check in the following order of preference. First, you will check the files of both the pieces. If they are different, then you simply use the file name. If the files are the same, like you see here, then you need to check the ranks of both the pieces. If they are different, then you will use the rank number. And in some rare cases, where both the file and rank are not sufficient individually to identify the piece, then you need to use both the file and rank in the notation. Here's a unique example. White has these 3 queens because of multiple pawn promotions. In this position, it is White's turn and he wants to capture this knight with this h4 queen. So we start with Q for the queen. Now we cannot use H since even this queen is on the H file. We cannot use 4 either since this queen is also on the 4th rank. Therefore, we will have to specifically use H4 to identify this queen. After this, we use X for the capture, followed by E1 which is the destination square, followed by this hash because it is also a checkmate. This is one of the most complicated examples you will see when it comes to chess notation. Now that you have learned all this, here's a quick test for you all. How will you notate this move by black? Let me know the correct chess notation in the comments section below. Let's see how many of you get this right. If you liked this tutorial, then hit the like button below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and for some interesting chess content, follow me on Instagram at ChessWizard84. Thanks for watching and I shall see you in my next video.